there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today we have a lot to get into, and first I want to show you some new supplies, some new products from our sponsor Ohuhu. You can find everything I'm going to show you today either on Amazon or at ohuhu.com. I will have links in the video description to everything that I'm using. So the first thing I want to share is this brand new turntable organizer that Ohuhu has come out with. This is such a lovely piece of desktop furniture, and it will hold a ton of supplies. I'll be using the Ohuhu Plus style markers in today's illustrations, and I just want to show you how well they fit here. Now I decided to put everything that I wanted to use in today's projects in the turntable to see how much it would hold. And I put both the 24 and 36 set of the Ohuhu Plus markers in here, and I divided them up by color families. Now the nice thing about using this more limited supply of markers is that I can keep everything in the turntable because there's not too many supplies. I can find what I need as I need it. I put the full set of Ohuhu colored pencils and the full set of 48 of the direct ink brush tip Ohuhu markers. And look how nice they look. And best of all, they're not packed in there like sardines, so it's easy to get them all out as I need them. And it keeps my desk nice and tidy, and it just spins so well. I'm very impressed with this product. Now I was curious because they sent me 2 of these caddies. I wondered, can I fit my entire set of 320 Ohuhu markers in here? And yes, you can. Look at that. They fit perfectly. And what's more, you can actually tip them on their sides for storage, so you can keep both ends of your markers inked at all times. And that's really the best way to store dual-ended markers, is on their side. So I love that they can look really cute on a shelf being stored, and then when it's time to create, you can grab them by the handle, take them to your desk, and you are good to go. So with that, let's start playing with these markers and see how the new Plus markers differ from the classic Ohuhu Honolulu style. Now, by uncapping, we can see that the nibs are about the same size. We also have that gray indication on the brush end of the markers. The Plus markers maybe are just a smidgen smaller, but that has to do with the type of material they are made out of. The Plus markers feature a foam rubber style nib, also called neoprene, and the old style markers are a compressed fiber nib. And if we look at them in action, we're going to see the Plus markers have a lot more flexibility and bend to the tip. Now these tips are more durable, they're more precise when you go to lay the tip down on your project, and they have a more controlled ink flow. Now compared to the old style marker, which is still fantastic and I use it all the time, you can still get those undulating lines very smoothly. You can still bend the nib for your thick and thin lines, but it doesn't have quite the spring back that the new style does. And also when you are pressing your nib down, you can see the new style will bend more than the old style, and also you don't get quite as much of a puddle of ink when you do press the nib down. So if you like to do flicking strokes, you're going to have a much more controlled amount of ink and not a big blob of ink. You can see that on that flick there. If you look at the flick from the old style marker, you're going to see you have a much darker start stroke because you are getting more of a puddle from the ink. But they're both great markers. It just depends on what your needs are. Now rest assured, the chisel nib is the exact same whether you get the old style or the Plus style Ohuhu Honolulu marker. You're going to get that same fantastic chisel nib for filling in the broad areas and getting your straight precise lines. Now I thought it'd be great to do a coloring demo here on this cute rubber stamp. I've had this in my stash for a while, and it's kind of one of my go-to for congratulations baby cards, but I wanted to show you this circular coloring technique, and this is just doing overlapping ovals. And the nice thing about this is it evenly saturates your paper with color, and it gives you a nice smooth streak-free coloring effect. Now sometimes it will look a little patchy at first, but as soon as your paper dries, it smooths right out. Now I want to show you a few blending techniques. My first blending technique I want to show you is palette blending, and when you have a smaller collection of markers, you're not going to have all those intermediary colors you need for smooth blends, but you can scribble a darker marker out on a non-porous surface like this plastic palette, and you can pick it up with a lighter marker, and then starting in at the shadows, you can blend out from there. And that will give you a nice smooth color, a nice blend, a nice intermediate color. It basically allows you to mix without having all of the colors in the world, because the Plus markers are currently out in a 24 and 36 set. There are 6 duplicate colors between those 2 sets, just an FYI, but the other ones are unique. Now I believe the long-term plan is to offer these open stock, and they have a large variety of colors they plan on coming out with, but for now you can find them in a 24 or 36 set. The brush nibs are very durable. They're going to last a lot longer than the original Ohuhu nibs, but they are not reversible, just an FYI. But they should last you longer than both ends of a classic Ohuhu nib. Of course, the holders are the same size. If you did need to replace a nib, you could with the old style Honolulu markers, but I don't think it's going to be necessary. So what I'm showing you here is just a variety of the different colors using that overlapping oval coloring method. Of course, alcohol ink blends so nicely and doesn't tend to streak anyway. You can be pretty haphazard with your coloring and still have a really beautiful effect. Now here I'm just going around the lion's face with a variety of different colors here from the new Ohuhu Plus marker set, just to show you some color variety. And I think that the colors they chose for these first iterations of the markers are just stunning, beautiful. You've got a really nice arrangement of colors, and since they will work with all the colors you already have, you don't have to worry. You can keep on using your older markers and adding these to them if you wish. One of the simplest blending methods I can share with you is just to overlap the same color you already used. So to do that, you're going to do your flat color like we previously did, then take the exact same color and add a shadow. This can be a shadow like I'm adding here, just a very kind of smooth edge on, I'm doing them all on the left side, something like that. It just gives you a little bit of tonal difference and makes it look a little bit extra or a little bit more chic and polished. Now, one of my favorite blending methods is dark to light. Here I'm taking this kind of dark orangey yellow color and adding it into the shadow area using my overlapping circles here. Then I'm going to go in with the medium tone, which is this this nice deep yellow. I'm going to color over everything I colored already and just bring that color up towards the tip where I'm going to have the highlight. And now I'm going in with my lightest yellow and I'm going over the tip area and over the entire tail. And look at that beautiful gradation. It looks like a little flame, and it's so easy to do. Now, the best advice I can give you when you're getting used to using your new alcohol markers is just to practice, play, try different things, and see what you get. Also, find a cardstock or a paper or a sketchbook you like and stick with it, because switching papers can also increase the learning curve of learning alcohol markers. So without further ado, let's do an illustration in one of my favorite papers, the Ohuhu marker pad. I took a photo when I was downtown in Hollowell, Maine, of this flower shop, and I thought it was such a cute little place. It would make a great illustration. And then when I started looking at the photo, I realized it was a perfect example for 1-point perspective. So what I've done here is put a little horizon line in there, and I've put a little dot on it, and that is where all of our lines converge. And it is just a little bit beyond the crest of the sidewalk there. And so what I'm doing here is drawing some vertical lines for like the corners and edges of buildings and windows and whatnot. And then when I see kind of a ridge or an edge of something like the this awning here, I am connecting my edges to the vanishing point on the horizon line. If you'd like a real-time version of this lesson, it is up now in Critique Club. I'll have a link in the video description. Critique Club is my monthly membership where people can pay $7.50 a month, and they can upload their work for feedback. They also have access to over 150 real-time tutorials like this one, and they have access to everything as long as they're a member. There's a wonderful community there, and there's lots of education over a variety of art materials. So if that sounds like something you would like, please check it out. I am, again, just finding all of my objects and edges, and just anything that is angular, that is architectural, I am drawing it back to that point on the horizon line. So 1-point perspective can be a really great tool for helping you really get some depth in your drawings. And also having a photo like this, which you can download in Critique Club, you can take your ruler and you can line things up. You can find your vanishing point by simply taking your ruler against all of the angles and seeing where they converge in the distance. It's a really wonderful trick, and generally I draw what I see, but sometimes our eyes can deceive us, and we need to kind of bring the science in a bit to really really prove that how much it's skewed as it gets away from us. It's really kind of neat, 'cause it's so this picture here shows such a dramatized 1-point perspective that I thought it would make a really great example for this lesson here. And I just love the depth that we get. And this is such a charming little downtown scene. I just thought it would be so fun to paint. In fact, the day we went, we were meeting some friends for lunch, and they were having some sort of festival in town. They had the fire department was there collecting donations. There was live music outside. In fact, we sat at a pub right down the street in this photo called the Liberal Cup, and we could listen to the music playing outside. And it was just so lovely. We've got American flag on the lamppost there. It just definitely has that kind of Main Street downtown, any, town in America feel to it. And I think it's very charming, and it just makes a fun little illustration. Of course, you can use this idea and do an illustration of your local downtown, anything like that. I think finding tutorials that can give you an idea to use on your own artwork is, the way to do it. It's a really great way to use a tutorial. The material I'm sketching with is a brown colored pencil from the Ohuhu color pencil set. I thought I might have a template that I could trace for that oval sign, but I didn't have anything that was the right size, so I just had to kind of wing it, which is fine. And I put a couple lines in there to help me figure out my lettering, but I decided I was just going to wait and do it with pens later. The nice thing about using colored pencil under alcohol marker is that it kind of blends through. Now here I'm just kind of flipping through this sketch pad. This is the Ohuhu marker pad, and I have 2 pages left. I am almost done this pad. I've been using this for years, and it's probably my most reliable favorite marker paper to use. Now it does bleed through to the back. You can kind of see on the facing page of this that we can see some bleed through from the previous page, but because it's a bleedy paper like that, it makes blending a lot easier. I find the papers that don't bleed through to the backside are difficult to blend on. Just my own personal preference and experience. But this paper has a bit of absorbency. So while on one hand it is going to take more ink, you need the ink in your paper to get the blends. So, it's kind of like, it's gonna use your marker faster, but you're going to be able to get blending. It just depends on what you like. If you like a more thin coat of marker and you don't mind streaks and whatnot, you might want one of the thinner marker papers or one of the bleed proof marker papers. But I like ones that in cardstocks that will have a little bit of give. Like the cardstock that we did the little tiger demo on, that was more of like a slick Bristol style paper. This has a little bit more tooth to it, which I like because I often want to put colored pencil on top, and I know I have that versatility with this versus a really slick cardstock or Bristol paper that might not want to take the pencil. I do find in general I can put a little bit of pencil on pretty much any paper except for the really slick coated marker papers. Now here I'm just trying to get used to what colors I might want to use, and I hadn't swatched my markers at this point, honestly, so I did end up stopping and doing that at one point, because you really need to swatch your markers, ideally on the paper you're using, but at least in the marker card that comes with a set, which I find is a pretty good example for most of the papers I tend to use, because I tend to use a paper that's a little more absorbent. But what I'm doing here is trying to get that really strong shadow, and the brick colors that I have are kind of this cherry wood color and this light peach color, and I find that for these shadows it worked pretty good. I did have to go over with some gray to desaturate that orangey brick color just because it was a little bit too much. But I do tend to exaggerate my colors in my illustrations anyway because I like the way it looks. Now for the asphalt, I'm just putting in some darker gray. Yes, I am pushing the contrast a little bit more, but I wanted to. That's my prerogative. Now I did struggle a bit with sky colors because I didn't have enough. I didn't have many gradient for blues in this set. There's pretty big jumps between the blues. So one thing I try is tip to tip blending, which is where you touch the 2 tips together to try to pick up the darker on the lighter and blend that way. But it wasn't working that well. So I started off by just adding my darkest color to the top and then tried to blend it with my next medium color in value, even though the color undertones are different. So I wasn't really happy with that. So I started to go back over with the darker and try to blend in with a lighter. And I was struggling, and we've got kind of a hot mess going here, but don't worry, just keep on adding more ink and blending, and eventually the inks on the paper are going to mix together, they're going to blend, they're going to layer up, and they're going to smooth out. But it does take a little bit of finessing. So that's where I go into with a palette blending method. That's where I take my darkest color and I scribble it on a plastic palette or actually a ceramic palette's better because plastic stains. This is what I had handy. You can use an old baggie, a piece of like plastic packaging, whatever you have really. You can even use the divider sheet that comes in your marker set. But, you know, with using the circular coloring, using the palette blending, we eventually get a nicely blended sky. You could even use a flicking method with an intermediary color starting at the top and flicking down into the lighter area. You know, honestly, try your different techniques and just keep on blending until you get something you're happy with. And it can take some time, and also it's going to look a little patchy until it dries. And this is a really big jump, and blues, purples, and reds are very difficult to blend if you don't have all those intermediary colors. So trying those tips are going to help you quite a bit. Another thing we could have done was gone with the lightest color and just kept layering it up. We wouldn't have gotten that really deep color at the top of the sky, but you know, it's another technique we can use. Now for the trees in the background, I'm just having a fun time with this. Like I put in a coat of the lighter green, and then I'm dabbing in these other greens and golds, and I just love how that distant foliage looks. I think it came out really nice. I did do a little flicking with this really pale denim color to help blend the sky a little bit too. That's why you can see some streaks at this point in the sky. Now for the building, I loved the little bits of exposed brick coming through the painted exterior, so I wanted to put those in there. Now there would actually be another point somewhere off to the left, but we really can't see that or anything to measure that out against, so I just kind of winged it with my bricks there. And the bricks on the face of the building would follow with the 1-point perspective and go to that vanishing point. But honestly, where they're such small pieces and it's so far away, you can kind of estimate it. You don't have to have it super precise. You can kind of fudge around and guess a little bit. And just remember where that vanishing point is, so that if you do need to add like windows, things like that, you can find it again and add them in. I tend to draw all the way through an illustration. I don't just start with a drawing, ink it, and then fill it in. I'm always drawing as I'm working on an illustration in alcohol markers. That's how I work. You may not want to work that way. You might want to get your illustration done completely on scrap paper, transfer it into your sketchbook, or even trace your reference photo. But I love to draw. I find that very fun. If you don't love to draw and you prefer to trace a reference photo, that's fine. Do what you want to do. But I think it's important to know these different techniques. So if you do want to draw, or if you're outside and you're on a beautiful day and you just want to sit down and do some sketching, you know, you can get something on paper that you're happy with. So if I was out there sketching from life, I would be holding my pencil up to the different angles and just bringing my pencil down to my paper and kind of drawing a line across that to get my perspective that way. It is a little bit more difficult to do that in plein air because you may not be able to identify the vantage point. If you move a little bit, your perspective is going to change a little bit. So I find just holding up a pencil or a stick or a ruler and getting the angles and pulling them down to my canvas to be the best option there. But even better if you have a easel that you can stand at and you can step back and you can bring your angles over that way. But that's a whole other lesson. Right now we're working from a photo, doing 1-point perspective, and that's enough, I think, to digest for one YouTube video. And again, like if you want to see the real-time version, hear the explanation as we go through the 1-point perspective, you can find that up now in Critique Club, and you can join and cancel at any time. So you're not locked into anything with Critique Club. And every year I do release the previous year's lessons as an archive. So if you want to buy lifetime access to the lessons and not be in a subscription, we have that as well. So I want to meet you where you're at, whether it's taking the videos on YouTube and getting the gist, or whether it's a more formal class. You know, I got you. So have a look around if you're curious in my school. But still working along on this illustration. The front of the buildings are darker than that brightly lit side, so I'm adding a glaze of shadow. Honestly, I could probably go darker with that, but you can always layer up with your markers. Like I showed you in our little demo on the lion, how we did we layered up color to get a little shadow. You can do that. You can keep adding layers to get, it's only going to go so dark, you know, just keep that in mind, but you can probably get about 3 layers of value from just layering up your markers on your illustration. You might want to let each layer dry in between, otherwise you may get some like feathering or bleed out from your lines. That's another reason I wait to the end to do my fine lining, because if I do have any sort of marker bleeds or anything like that, I can clean it up when I do my fine lining. And I'm also going to use some acrylic paint pens here too, so I'm really not worried about my pencil line showing through or my plants hovering in midair, because I know I can put in my little plant stands and all of those details, even some flowers over dark foliage if I want to, with my acrylic markers. So I find having a variety of different media that work well together is really wonderful, because every media is going to have its pluses and minuses. Alcohol markers, their big plus is they are vibrant, they are immediate, they are fun to use. One of their minuses is they're transparent, so I can't layer light over dark. But if I add that with colored pencil, or I add that with acrylic marker, I can get those lights on top of darks. So, finding the best of all of your media and mixing them together is why mixed media is so fun and popular. So here's a good example of where I want to layer light over dark. I was sketching in the stripes and I had a little brain cramp, and I could not remember under the blue which stripe starts, if it's a white or a red one, and I accidentally went in with a red. I'm like, so I just ended up filling in the entire flag stripe area with red, because I filled the blue area, the star area, with blue, and I knew I was going to go in with a white marker to touch that up. So it's like, well, might as well do that to the stripey area too, and we'll just go in with a white marker afterwards and fill in. So you have so much versatility if you are willing to do mixed media. And if you have a paper that's going to support it, like this paper here in the Ohuhu marker pad, that's great. I'll have to do a sketchbook flip through of this when I get those last 2 pages done. Now, granted, this is not a every page is beautiful sketchbook. There's a lot of swatches. There's a lot of trial and error in here, but I absolutely love it because the finished illustrations I think are fantastic. And then the messy pages where I swatch to show you that an actual person used this and tested stuff out. And I think that's kind of charming. Now, this pad does have removable pages. So if I say wanted to frame something, I could tear out the page easily. They're perforated and I could frame it. Now, keep in mind, alcohol markers are not light fast, and it doesn't matter how much you spend on your alcohol markers or what brand you buy. None of them are light fast. So just keep that in mind, because you would not want something you spend a lot of time on to fade. And if I was to tear this out and hang it up on my wall that gets sunlight, it's going to fade. So I'm just as happy keeping it in a sketchbook for now. There are things you can do to prevent fading, such as spraying it with UV spray and framing it under plexiglass or UV glass. But at the end of the day, it's still alcohol markers. They're a dye-based product and they will fade eventually. So I think keeping them safe and sound in your sketchbooks is the way to go. Now, I have heard rumors of some alcohol markers yellowing, and I haven't really had that problem with these Ohuhu markers. I know they have a set that's white labeled, that's not in their own developed marker lines, but their Honolulu, their plus markers, their Kaula markers, those all use the Supreme premium inks, and you shouldn't have that issue if you're buying those Ohuhu markers. So just a little FYI there. They're the ones that I recommend, and I haven't had any yellowing. And we will do a flip through of this book in the future, and you'll be able to see Ohuhu markers used from the original line, the original Oahu line, all the way up to the Honolulu Plus and Honolulu S series. So stay tuned for that. It'll probably be in a month or so, because it won't take long to fill those last 2 pages. So here you can see, going over with the acrylic pens, how nice they are, how they really add a lot of depth and body to our illustrations, how we can add nice opaque details, and it just gives it a more painterly look, which is kind of the look I go for with my illustrations. We're all different. We're all going to have different things that we enjoy, but I just love how I can go in and add those details. And these markers are quite matte. They're not shiny, so they don't really look a lot different than where I have the alcohol markers, which I like, because if you have shiny patches on your work, that can be unless it's like a gold metallic hint, like I'll do a little a little gold border on that sign with the Ohuhu metallic gel pen. But other than that, you kind of want the finish on the page to be similar. Now you could do things, you could seal your pages to help unify the finish a bit, but I'm always a little leery where I'm using mixed media, what finish is not going to bleed certain materials, so I'd rather just leave it as is. And I like that their brush markers do not give you glossy sheen, and it doesn't look a lot different than the way the markers do. Now here we're putting our stripes in over our what do we call it? Our flag. And I'm also adding some other details like the panes on the window. Sorry that my head's in there. I needed to look straight down and make sure it was lined up well. You got to be careful when you're doing this against a ruler because it's really easy to have ink puddle on the ruler and then have it smudge when you move it. So just be aware when you're doing that to be careful. I'm also adding some highlights onto the bricks and other little white accents and redoing some of the trim in that light mint green where I felt it needed it. Now the word antiques is on this window and I've got to make sure that that stays in perspective as well. And I am using a fine tip gel pen for this that's really opaque. Rather than the brush marker because it just is not fine enough for that. And I'm using the Ohuhu liquid fine liners to do my fine black details. I like this pen set because it has so much ink in it. It has outlasted my other black fine liner sets and I use them all the time. So I would recommend this if you're looking for a set of black fine liners. I know you can get them on Amazon. Amazon usually has the best price, or the Ohuhu website. They have them at Michael's too, but I think they're around $20 at Michael's. And if you buy them on Amazon or Ohuhu, I think they're like $15. Sometimes they go on sale for less. So, just be smart with your money. But I mean, hey, if you need to run into Michael's and grab a pack of pens, I still would recommend these because they're going to be a heck of a lot cheaper than Micron's and they're going to give you way more ink. And the feed of how fast the ink comes out is the same as a Micron. It's a very well designed marker and I highly recommend it. These are the liquid filled fine liners. The regular fine liners are good too. I just feel like I have way more ink in these and they don't run out as easily. I hope they offer them open stock one day because I would like to be able to buy a whole box of like the number 3 size for classes and whatnot because that's the size I use the most. Now the different techniques I use for fine lining, I use a lot of the scribbly techniques when I'm doing flowers and foliage and whatnot. I'll use some hatching. But generally I'm just kind of giving some definition. I'm not doing a lot of really tricky inking styles here. I just want to kind of get that illustration look in there. I guess it probably kind of looks like a coloring page after I put the lines in there. But you know what? That's a great, I think that's really nice because I know a lot of people who use Ohuhu markers and Ohuhu products enjoy adult coloring, and that can give you a lot of ideas. If you're maybe doing an architectural coloring page or a cozy coloring page, I think this could give you some good approaches on how you can get some, more realistic looks to it. I think it's always good to learn, right? It's always good to try different things and learn. If you don't love the way it comes out, well, try something different next time. You're only out a piece of paper or a sheet in your coloring page. I thought the hatching was too strong here, so I went over with one of the gray alcohol markers and toned it down, just went over it. It's very easy. Now, one thing I want to warn you about using your alcohol markers over acrylic is that it will dissolve the acrylic paint. So make sure you scribble your pen off on a scrap paper if you go over acrylic paint with your markers. Otherwise, that paint that you've kind of dissolved a little bit could clog the nib of your marker, and you don't want to do that, especially with these plus markers that are more expensive than the traditional old style Honolulu markers. Another thing to keep in mind when you are layering up different materials is what will stick over what. Color pencils are probably the most difficult thing to get material to stick on top of, so I tend to leave the colored pencils till last. They're also kind of translucent, so I know my fine liner will show through them a bit. So what I tend to do is the alcohol marker, acrylic marker, then fine liner, then colored pencil. So just kind of think of that order of operations while you're working. And that pretty much does it for this. We're going to add a little bit more of fine lining for those crisp details where we don't have colored pencil. We didn't put a lot of colored pencil anyway, so it should be fine. And that's pretty much it. I want to thank thank Ohuhu for sponsoring this video and invite you to unlock the circular coloring technique with the Ohuhu Honolulu Plus markers. The Supreme Brush alcohol markers are available on the Ohuhu website, Amazon, and more. Search Ohuhu Plus markers on all platforms. Go and grab your deal and elevate your coloring skills today. I want to thank you so much for watching. You can find a full tutorial for the Illustration and Critique Club. I hope you have a wonderful day. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye!